If I have a belief, but I still struggle when I hear somebody else share their belief, then I don't know if that is being conscious as an observer of your belief system. If you can't recognize that everybody's allowed to have a belief system, whether it's in alignment with yours.
Freedom for me is being able to think for myself, is to read what I want, to ponder on it, and not have any preconceived ideas and old beliefs that tell me how I should be thinking about something. Like I said, you have to experience not having freedom before you can truly appreciate it. My name is Georgia Clare, and this podcast makes sense.
Makes sense.
When people hear the word cult, they often imagine something extreme, isolated compounds, strange rituals, a single charismatic leader pulling strings. But what if that image is incomplete and jaded? What if the most powerful cults don't actually look strange at all because they feel familiar, socially reinforced, and morally justified? Today's conversation is about the science of belief, how belief systems are created, how they recruit us, how they sustain themselves, and why leaving them can very often feel terrifying, even when they no longer fit who we are. My guest today is Georgia Clare, and Georgia grew up inside the Jehovah's Witnesses, a tightly structured belief system she never consciously chose. Leaving wasn't just a change of her belief, it meant losing community, certainty, and identity itself. What's powerful, though, is what came next. Today, Georgia has created a sanctuary of sorts, a space for people who've hit rock bottom, lost certainty, or had their lives quietly or violently unravel. Through her writing, meditation, courses, and community, she helps people rebuild a sense of self, reconnect with purpose, and remember that they're not broken, they're just waking up just like she did. But this episode is not about religion, because you don't need to belong to a religious organization to live inside a high-controlled belief system, do you? If belief is shaped through repetition, social proof, fear of exclusion, and moral pressure, well, the uncomfortable question becomes this: how many of us are truly free thinkers? And how many of us are simply living inside a socially acceptable cult that we've never questioned before? Folks, welcome Georgia Clare to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. Georgia, I'm grateful that you're here.
I think the power of now was actually the biggest impact on me. It was like an amazing wake-up call, because the way the Jehovah's Witnesses belief and faith is that you're living for a future date. You're living for a time. They all believe that Jehovah's Witnesses are the only ones who will live forever on the earth, and everybody else will not be around. So everybody's living for this future date when things are perfect on the earth, not living for now. They're all living for something in the future. And I just thought, I'm missing my life. I should be living now. I should be enjoying every day now. And so I kept on reading, because that's me. That's how I learn and get through things. And I just kept reading and reading different things. And it changed my thinking. It started to gradually change my thinking. And there was a gap that widened. And
Let me ask you a question about that. This is fascinating. So, just recap. It was all you knew. It was a closed environment. And the only time you ever got to go out and explore was to go visit other environments, which was probably about as exciting as it got. And in that closed environment, it's a high control environment as well.
Yes.
And one of the things that I really want to hit on that's going to come into play with the next part of this conversation was that you somehow got your hands on this book, one of the greatest books ever, The Power of Now, which talks about something that most humans struggle with, but at least outside of the environment you're in, people have access to learning about the present moment. Mm-hmm. I always say we have to unwrap the present moment, this beautiful, generous present moment. But part of the control was fear-based. Mm-hmm. And it was about this idea: if you're not doing this, if you're not following these rules, you're going to be damned like everybody else. Yes. I would assume that is what would prompt you to go out and preach to others to try to save them, right?
Yes, yes.
But at the same time, the the environment you were in sounded like a safe place, and it sounded like you
Yes.
felt love, and it gave you purpose.
Mhm.
So that said, how did you cop a book of The Power of Now? Were you just like a naughty girl that like stepped into a
Yes.
library down the street? How did you do it?
Well, it wasn't like anybody's, watching what I do in that, checking what about on Amazon or going to bookshop. But it is, you're right, it's fear-based. So I knew that maybe that wasn't, I shouldn't be reading things like that. I shouldn't be thinking things like that. I should just, concentrate on whatever the Bible teaches, and that should be enough. I shouldn't need anything other than that. But I can't remember where I bought it actually, or how I came across it. Strange, I can't remember, but I did. And I remember it being on the arm of the chair, the sofa, when my sister came to visit. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I wanted to see that, even though my sister's very open-minded. But yeah, so it was that sort of, that thinking of, it's me. It's all the way I was brought up was you follow the rules and you don't do anything to bring reproach on. Something I was always told was, don't bring reproach on Jehovah's name, which Jehovah is God. Well, that's what they teach anyway. So yeah, it was just like I say, it was a gradual process for a few years. But then in 2016, my ex-husband and I were living in Thailand, and our reason for being in Thailand was as missionaries, and we worked in the head office there, called the Bethel. And funnily enough,
Wait. Hold on one sec.
Sorry.
Did you just say you were called for battle?
No.
Oh,
No, we were
so is
missionaries.
there a process when you reach a certain age or something where, like many other religions, you're called to go out and preach? And I would assume that's the marketing and advertising campaign, or what is
It
that?
is, but no, you preach from very young, from a child. You're taught to preach. I was taught to. I learned sermons and Bible scriptures when I was 5 years old. In fact, when I was 5, I was giving talks from the stage, from the platform at the Kingdom Hall, which is their church. So you're taught to do that from a very young age, and then you get to a certain age, teens usually, sometimes younger, sometimes older, where you decide to get baptized. It's kind of, it's not pushed, but it's expected. It's expected to do that. And also it's expected that when you leave school, you don't go into, I think this has changed recently, funnily enough, but for me, going into higher education was a no-no. It was definitely not allowed to do. I was expected to leave school and go full-time really into the preaching work and do a part-time job to support myself. That's what kids my age did if they were spiritual.
So not, we're going to draw a pretty crazy, reflection on how, I can't wait to get to the part of this conversation where I'm just going to ask you, so now that you've left that cult, how do you like our cult? But, the word sin is very, very commonly used here. And it's a way of making somebody feel ashamed for doing something. And it's no different,
Yes.
so I get that. And if that's ingrained into a child,
Mm.
talk about childhood trauma. We all have childhood trauma. It's no different. So, we forgive everybody for they know not what they do. But that's a really, really interesting thing. So you're in this other country. You said it was Thailand?
Yes, yeah, we visited Thailand in 2007 as a family with my two daughters, just on holiday, as a vacation, and we kind of fell in love with it. But we went to the local congregation in Phuket, and we thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could come and work here as preaching as missionaries? So we wrote to the Bethel, which is their head office, and of course they said, yeah, that would be great. So we did, and it was fabulous, to be honest. It was a wonderful adventure. Because we did it as a family, and for many years we were there as a family. But then as the girls got older, late teens, early 20s, they didn't want to be there anymore. It wasn't for them. So we came back to France, rented them a house here, and then my ex-husband and I went back. to Thailand, and that's when we started working in the head office there. And the thing is, as we both got closer to the top, effectively, especially him as a man,
Sure.
it was a little bit like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. You kind of see that things
Right.
aren't actually the way we're all told. And we both became rather disillusioned. And then in 2016, we were living in Bangkok, and he had to come back to France.
Can I ask you,
Yes,
can I ask
sure.
you, because, you know, I love the analogy of the Wizard of Oz, but I would assume that I think his last name was Russell that created this and then it
Yes.
evolved. And by the way, you know, what I found is that, you know, this was created based on the idea that the Christian religion was somewhat corrupt or something like that. So that was that was part
Yeah.
of it as well. No, what, you want to be corrupt? Oh no, you don't want to come here. But I would assume that if I was running some sort of an organization like this, that I would be fully aware. Because I mean, all these stories you hear are when you get too close to the fire, you burn your
Yeah.
hands. So, you know, I would assume that that is the danger zone, or maybe the structure is set. And you know, this is in the assumption that the people that are running something like this are trying to prevent people from finding out this information.
Oh,
I would
yes,
assume that
yes.
that they felt that at that level that you're so committed that you won't care when you notice that. How does that work? You know, and also what was it? What were the types of things that you saw that made you go, hmm?
Well, living in Thailand, obviously it's a poorer country, but then there's not really, or when we lived there anyway, which is, you know, around 2015 time and before that, there wasn't a much of a middle class. There's a massive divide between the rich and the poor. And most of the people in the congregation that we were in were very poor. And we were working at this Bethel, spending time there doing different things, getting to know people there. And it just seemed like, I can remember one instance where there was an older couple in the Kingdom Hall, and he got really sick and they were very poor. So he was only able to afford to go into the government hospital, which conditions, I didn't go and see him in hospital, but my husband did. And he just said, I can't even tell you how awful it was there. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, at Bethel, they have a fleet of cars and cars are expensive in Thailand, much more expensive than in Europe and the UK, because it's a relatively new thing there. And I was, you know, so this fleet of cars that actually were not always used. They were there just in case. And there's all sorts of other things that, you know, money's no object, and they can't help somebody in the local congregation who's been faithful to go to a decent hospital. And it was just little things like that and hypocritical things as well. People professing to be poor and spiritual, because actually the poorer you were, the more spiritual you were. So professing to be like that, but actually, you know, you spot them wearing a Rolex and it's not a cheap one from Bangkok, and accepting gifts for positions, and just lots of little things that I noticed that, to be honest, not necessarily so much that I noticed, but that my husband noticed, because obviously being a man, he had a position as an elder. But the big straw that broke the camel's back was I was on my own in Bangkok for a month, and I got two things actually. I got bitten by a dog quite badly on my leg, and I was out on the preaching work at the time, and it freaked me out, and I was not in a good way. And I just kept thinking, I was always told that, you know, God is looking after you, Jehovah's protecting you. I'm out here doing his work, and I've been mauled by a dog and having to go to the hospital every single day and traumatized by the whole thing. And I kept thinking, why didn't he protect me? Why didn't he protect me? But the big thing was, while he was away, my husband sent me, he said, you're not going to like this, but I want you to watch this YouTube video. He said, please watch it. And it was, I don't know if you've heard of the Australia Commission. It was in 2015-16. The government in Australia took the Jehovah's Witnesses to court because they'd uncovered over 1,000 cases of hidden child abuse.
Okay.
And so some of the top members of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, one in particular, had to go to Australia and it was like a courtroom situation, and it was on YouTube. And I didn't watch it all, but I did watch some of it, and it was relevant to me, which my husband knew, because I'd been abused by my father as a child, and my sister had too. And it was me who put him in prison when I was 29. So I remember watching this and thinking, I can't be part of this.
It's like all of a sudden you started to, as I would say,
Yeah.
make sense of things. This is so fascinating. Once again, I think it's important because I'm going to ask you a question, but before I do that, as a disclaimer, I do have some friends that are Jehovah's Witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And if they watch this and listen to this, they're going to say, this woman's crazy. She's lost her mind.
Probably.
And you know what? There's a good chance, because if I like Georgia, she could have lost her mind.
I have been called crazy before too. So,
but my point is that, just for the sake of recognizing this is her experience, and that's all that matters, right? We are not, this is not an attack against an organization.
Oh, no,
this is a woman's story, and that's important for everybody to understand. But
I also, yes, sorry, I don't want to interrupt,
yeah,
but I'm very conscious there are plenty of people out there on YouTube bashing the Jehovah's Witnesses and trying to pull them down. I'm not doing that. This is my experience, and all I want to do is use my experience to help other people.
That's it. And as you'll see, the whole root of this show has very little to do with this particular organization, because this can happen in any case. I mean, like if somebody is out there and they are just deeply rooted from birth as like a Republican or a Democrat, like it could be, they might realize they're in a cult as well. So what I'm hearing though, is that because somebody else that went through your experience or your husband's experience could very easily justify it and just say, oh, well, and not find that YouTube video, or see the YouTube video and not believe it. So the science of belief is really the situation here. Is it safe to say that for whatever reason, you and your husband were in an open and curious position where perhaps you were vulnerable to, or curious to find out if what you were involved in was legit? I mean, were you curious about it, or did the universe just send you that YouTube video and send you the Australian, story?
I think it was a bit of both, to be honest. I think we had each other for a start. So we had the support that we could talk together about it and discuss things. I think that in many ways, I came across things just at the right time. But I think I'd become more open-minded. Plus, being in Thailand at the time, I was kind of away from a loss. I was away from any family or close friends. We both were, and being in a foreign country, it's sort of it can draw you closer together when you're dealing with something. So no, I think it was just that, really. I just got to the point where I thought, I can't be a part of this. I can't be true to myself. I can't be authentic and be part of it. It just sort of seemed like I just had to make a decision. And I knew how massive the decision was,
right?
Because I knew what could happen. And what did happen actually was that I lost pretty much all my friends, and my mother and my brother cut off all contact with me.
Well, let's
still to this day.
Before we get to that part.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, jumping ahead.
Well, no. I mean, but what's fascinating and what we love to talk about is just how, for the most part, I perceive that to a degree, the world is sleepwalking, meaning, via cognitive bias, they've decided on something and don't let anything else in. And this is one of our biggest challenges, to the point where if anything new comes into your, field of perception, and it's not
Yes.
in line with what you know and you've grown up knowing, not only will you discount it, but you will look at it as the devil. I mean, it's the opposite.
Mm,
So for the most part, I consider that the world is in a drift, just like you go in the ocean and you start swimming. And it's not until you look at the beach and realize that your towel is like a mile up the beach that
yeah.
you realize that you've drifted. So I understand how you were kind of having these insights, and it was a congruency thing. And you just said, I can't be 100% committed and lock everything else out. If this is going on, there must be something else out there to know. So I get that. But part of the structure, which by the way is not a Jehovah's Witness thing, a lot of people listening to
No,
this
it's
right
not.
now are
Mm,
locked into ideas and concepts. And if they
mhm.
decide to get out of it on the family level and the community level, there's a price to pay. So
It's
what was
huge.
it like,
Yes.
that moment where you said, or you and your husband said, I think we need to get out of here, but
Mm.
felt that wave of penalty and of
Yes.
damnation coming as a result, and potentially losing everything?
Well, funnily enough, we made the decision separately. I decided first, and I just said to him, I can't do this anymore. It's wrong. It just feels so wrong. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to keep going for a bit longer. But actually, I think he only carried on for about a month. And he said, oh, I can't do it as well. But I think what you were talking about the expression cognitive dissonance, came to me because we often see what we want to see. And like you say, this isn't just in a cult or religion or a community. It can be in a marriage. It can be anything really. Our belief, we believe what we want to believe, and consequently we often see what we want to see. And this is not always a good thing, because a lot of our beliefs can be outdated. They can be from childhood, from a life that we're not really living anymore, and it can limit us in so many ways. To be constrained by these beliefs can stop us from living a full life. And I was so determined not to do that. I realized that I did want to live a full life. It wasn't like I was 95 and I'd left. So, I was 49 when I left. So, plenty of life still to live. But I also realized that maybe I could help others, because I was able to come through it. And it did take work, actually. I did lots of different things to help me get rid of these limiting beliefs. And I believe that I have. I mean, I don't think you necessarily always get rid of all of them. But
Well, that's an interesting question that just popped into my head. Is
mhm.
you've come so far, and I won't ask your age, but right, that's not what this episode's about. But are you aware? Because here I am, I'm 54, going to be 55 this year, and I have childhood trauma that still affects me today. Are you conscious of some of those beliefs that are still, playing out?
Yes, I think I am. Funnily enough, very recently, 24th of December, I went to midnight mass in the UK with my partner, and I'd never been to a church service before. And it was 8 years ago since I left. So it's not something I've had anything to do with. I went from having the Bible and spirituality that way in my life 24/7 to nothing, to really pushing that all away and not wanting anything to do with it anymore. And then I went to this midnight mass just purely out of curiosity, and it was beautiful. It was a wonderful experience, to see people getting together. And I've forgotten what your question was now. Sorry.
So cute. Well, I was getting into this. I was in the midnight mass with you, and I was just
Yeah.
thinking. So, I decided to go to a corrupt midnight mass. So the question that I asked was, we all understand childhood trauma, and even though we've quote unquote move past things. I'm a different person now. I can look back
Yes.
at some of my belief systems that I had when I was a
Ah,
child
yes,
and
I know what you
understood
mean.
they came
Yeah.
from my mother, father, teacher, preacher. But even though I know that they are not in line with me anymore, they don't have agency anymore, to a degree, they do every now and then. And it might show up how I
Yes.
fly
Yeah.
off the handle or
True.
notice something bothers me or I get nervous.
Yeah, that I do understand that. And yes, I think every so often what year was it? About 2 years ago, I did a sort of a course that really helped me to dig deep within myself. And it was really enlightening because it helped me to see a lot of my limiting beliefs. And I think now, whether I'm aware of all of them, but I've worked very hard on getting rid, or you don't really get rid of a belief, you just change it out and swap it for something new. I've worked really hard on that and it has changed my life. Just a simple thing of before I thought that I knew what was right. I was convinced that what I believed was absolutely right and it's what everybody should believe. And I did not believe that one bit now. Obviously, I do still have beliefs that are mine, but I believe everybody has the right to believe whatever they believe. And it doesn't bother me when I hear a belief, for instance, that is completely against what I believe, because I believe that I try and respect other people's choices. But yes, I think I'm try and be aware of what's holding me back, having a limiting belief. And to be honest, writing helps a lot with that. I write every morning, and I've done it for years and years. I write a journal, and no matter what, even if I'm away, my journal goes with me. I never don't write my journal. That wasn't very good English, actually, grammatically correct, but I always write my journal. And that has helped a lot. That really helps me to kind of see what I feel. I think it was Flannery O'Connor who said, I don't know what I think until I read what I've written, something like that.
We don't take ownership of it until we write it down. And
Yeah.
thank God that you started writing, because I wouldn't know you because I met you in that realm.
Yes.
And also, obviously we'll put all of Georgia's, contact information, but she just has a delightful Substack, which is a free kind of newsletter that anybody could sign up for, and you could see what it's like to read what she reads. I wrote something down that is very in tune with what you just said, and I want to read it and see if it lands.
Okay, sure.
I said, is true freedom about escaping belief or just simply becoming conscious of the beliefs that we kind of live inside? And you said before, and this is a big challenge, that if I have a belief, which is fine, as you said, if I have a belief and I say that's my belief, but I still struggle when I hear somebody else share their belief, then I don't know if that is being conscious as an observer of your belief system, if you can't recognize that everybody's allowed to have a belief system, whether it's in alignment with yours. So this concept of being free, because somebody that's still in the Jehovah's Witness will look at you and not see that you're free. They'll see you're lost and confused because they're still tethered to something and nothing else. But right now, and you know what? We can't discount that because they're right too, right? Because that's their version of right.
Exactly.
But
yes.
What's your current reality on what freedom means? What does it mean for you now? Because I mean, the world is your oyster. You can leave this podcast right now and walk down the street and get a baguette and a pain au chocolat and go into a magazine store and read any damn thing you want. So tell me what your definition of freedom is.
Freedom. I think I appreciate my freedom so much because I think you have to have, it's like you have to have cold to know what hot is. You have to have inside to have an outside. So I've known what not having freedom is. So now that I am free, I never take it for granted. I appreciate it so much. And freedom for me is being able to think for myself, is to read what I want, to ponder on it and not have any preconceived ideas and old beliefs that tell me how I should be thinking about something, about anything, about world events, about spirituality, about how I should dress or what I should watch on TV. That is freedom for me. Freedom to write what I want, to express myself. Actually, yes, that is the biggest freedom for me, is to be able to just to write and to help other people with my experiences and just be open and authentic and not trying to be something, not trying to live up to standards. Or obviously we all have standards and that's a good thing, but somebody else's rules and standards. I have my own standards now. I have my own beliefs, and they're beliefs and standards and ideas that I've crafted myself. Obviously, they're still going to be influenced by my childhood, by the experiences I've had in my life, places I've lived, where I live now, culture. But I've made those decisions. Nobody else. Nobody's forced me. Nobody's made me feel bad because of the decisions I'm making. It's just, that's freedom. That is absolute freedom to me.
You just said a word that is just so powerful in this moment, and that is the word culture. You know, if you look at the first four letters, it says cult. Yes. And if you go somewhere, the coolest part about traveling, if you've never been somewhere, is to experience their culture.
Yes.
And what's interesting about that is how we don't seem to have a problem with that. We could say we like it or we don't like it. How did you like the French culture? I liked it. I didn't like it. But accepting it's the French culture, it's just fascinating. And I think the biggest challenge that we have is that there's a paradox. Because if I snap my fingers and you were back before the power of now, and I said, Georgia, what is your definition of freedom? You probably, just like somebody else in that situation, would probably define freedom as freedom from, problems, and freedom from, like, if I throw all the TVs out here, I can say freedom from the chaos of the news and the idiot box.
Yeah. So or freedom from, I didn't have to worry about buying my children new shoes or feeding them. That's a freedom. But I think, like I said, you have to experience not having freedom before you can truly appreciate it, I believe.
What's fascinating about the topic of freedom, maybe this could be a collaboration we could do on Substack, is it just like beauty, it's in the eyes of the beholder, right? I mean, so if we were to go around and interview a million people about freedom, we would have to accept all of them as their experience. I want to move into as we kind of come to the end, I want to move into this very interesting concept that I've been sharing with you. And that is, I'm just going to read one of the questions that I wrote, and I'd love to get your reflection on it. It says, you don't need to be in a religious organization to live inside what we consider to be a closed belief system. Because from the outside, if you don't think you live in a closed belief system and you look at something like Jehovah's Witness and you go, that's a closed, controlled belief system, you're just not living in the, as Eckhart Tolle would say, the now, and you're not looking around your own. So we don't have to be in a religious organization to live in a closed belief system. When you look at the modern media, right, the politics, the social identity, right, we see some of the same patterns. So here's my question. If someone consumes the same narratives every day and never questions them, so think about what that means. I always say what we consume, we assume. So if somebody and with social media right now, people listening to this podcast are consuming it right now. And I want to take this opportunity to say, you do not have to create an opinion on this episode, on me, on Georgia, on the topic. It's just something that you're consuming, right? And you can process it and take something from it or not. But if someone consumes the same narratives, narrows down and consumes the same narratives, and that's what a closed environment is, and we're living in one right now, every day, but never questions them. I'm okay with anybody consuming whatever they want. That's up to them.
Yes, I agree.
But what I encourage people to do is question them. So if they don't question them, how is that any different from what we call a high controlled belief system. How is our world today? Because everybody right now is filing in their opinions and their concepts, and I don't like, she's crazy, he's crazy, I'm not, I'm crazy, they're crazy.
Yeah.
And then there's people that are just floating in confusion. How is the world that we live in, if we're looking at the idea of a closed, controlled belief system, how is the world we live in today any different than Jehovah's Witness?
Well, it's not. If we don't question, and I think that you've hit the nail on the head there, really, because that is the most important thing we can do, is question things all the time. I do it even now. I question whether I'm making the most of my life. It's a precious gift, what we have. For me to be this age now is a precious gift. And if I don't constantly question whether this is right for me, what I'm doing, the things I do every day, relationships I'm in, people that I'm with, the way I spend my time, if I don't question that, I'm just kind of coasting through life. And I think I was before. I think I was just, I didn't question things. It was just, well, this is my life. It's pretty good. I had a decent marriage. I had 2 beautiful daughters. We weren't rich, we weren't poor, we were just in the middle. And yeah, I didn't question anything, but I do now. And I think whatever your life is, question whether it's the best thing for you. Question whether it's really you. Because sometimes we can be living a life that isn't ours. We can be living a life that is other people expect us to live. It could be a life that our parents wanted us to live. It could be a life that our peers expect us to live. And to step outside of that, it's a risk. It's a risk. You risk looking a fool, different, strange, weird. You risk losing people, but nothing is more terrible than losing yourself and losing your life, really. So constantly questioning whether, is this my life? Is this the life I want to live?
It doesn't sound any different than the experience you had pre-49. That's what's so fascinating about this.
It's true.
And by the way, that was my intention, was not to discount anything or anyone. And my intention is not to place somebody that's listening to this, like, into this position where I'm challenging their ability to wake up. Like, everything is just fine. Whatever you call fine is fine. I just love to say, we were taught that, what you see is what you get. And I believe that is true, but it doesn't necessarily make it what is. So before we close out, tell everybody a little bit. I mean, you've written books and you've got a Substack, and what are you excited about? What is the work that you're excited on that obviously we'll share, but that people can come check out?
2 things come to mind. One is my Substack, because I've taken a different direction. A couple of months ago, I'd started the Substack to write about all my experiences when my marriage broke up. I'd been married for 34 years and it devastated me. So when I came through that, I thought, well, I can write about my experiences and how I did it and how I rebuilt my life, etc., etc. But then I got to a point a couple of months ago where I thought, do you know what? I'm just rehashing the past. It's writing about it all the time and how devastating it was and how I grieved and everything. It was keeping me, part of me, in the past.
Right.
And it's an example of me doing what was right for me. So I thought, well, I still want to write about my life and experiences, but it's got a different tone now. So now I just write about how to have a peaceful life and how to question things like that. So it's now changed from being the Rebuild Compass to being La Forêt Intérieure, which is the inner forest. So so that's a change direction. Actually, it's straight away, I've had a completely different reaction. I've got more engagement. People are loving it, commenting.
It's more
and
authentic.
I think it's what people need. Exactly. It's more me.
It's so fascinating. There's a moment where a really good mentor will sit there and listen and listen and listen, but at some point say, maybe it's time to drop your story. maybe it's time to drop your story. But at the same time, we all have to go through a reckoning of our story and come to understand it to get to this place that you're in right now.
Yes.
So we've got your Substack, and it's called, I believe it's just called Georgia Clare Substack, right?
It is. Yes, it's Georgia Clare. The name of the Substack is actually La Forêt Intérieure, but to find it, it's Georgia Clare. Yeah.
And her last name is spelled C-L-A-R-E, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. I follow the Georgia Clare Substack, and that's the first time I've heard her speak French, by the way. She's got a very nice accent.
Well, no, we do speak in English. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is a guided journal I created last year. And it was what I wished I'd had when I left being a Jehovah's Witness. And it's not specifically for Jehovah's Witnesses, who've left, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. It's for anybody moving out of a closed community, or it could even be a long marriage or anything like that. And it's called You're Allowed to Question.
How funny is that we organically brought that up? You're like, this is perfect. He's leading me right to the journal.
No, I've only just realized you were saying that. So it's basically, it sort of helps people to realize that they are allowed to question, and it's okay to have had doubts and to basically find themselves. And I also created some meditations. I think there's 5 meditations, which there are QR codes in the book that they can be accessed to support the journaling. One is coming home to your own voice, permission to doubt, releasing fear, rebuilding trust. Because one thing I noticed is, I've come across a lot of people like me, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's still, a lot of them are still stuck in the past. In that they still believe it, they still believe part of it. So they're terrified that basically they're displeasing God and they haven't let those beliefs go. And it's holding them back. They're not able to let go and move on. So that's why I created this journal. And actually, I have had very good feedback on it, because it was funny, because as I was making it, I could kind of feel it, like it took me back. And it really, when I was recording the meditations, I thought, wow, I really could have done with this. And it resonated with me. So I know it's resonated with others too. I have a really good friend who lives in France, he left around the same time as me, and we keep in touch. And I sent it to him and I said, I want your opinion on it. And he said, oh, it's great. It's exactly right. So
I could have used it years ago.
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to check out her Substack, and her journal sounds delicious. I'm so honored that we had this conversation. I feel like there's so many more questions, but we're going to close it out with this. This is something that I kind of received, and I want to just close out with this. The concept that is running through my head now is that every cult begins with certainty, whether you want to call it a cult or not. But the most powerful cults, the most powerful ones, don't need leaders, walls built around them, or rules. They actually survive through agreement. So think about what agreement means right now. What does it mean when you agree with something? You essentially build your own walls and your own rules. So if you've been coaxed into agreement, then you need to recognize that. So the concept of awakening, which is what this show is all about, isn't really about rejecting your belief or rejecting beliefs in general. It's more about reclaiming authorship over your belief. And I think that's what rang through. So my question after that is, makes sense?
My name is Georgia Clare, and this podcast makes sense.
Makes sense.